Have you ever felt a presence so certain you could swear it was touching your skin, a breath on your neck, a hand at your heart, even though the person was miles away? If you've ever woken with his name on your lips, felt his mood ripple through your day, or been startled by a sudden rush of knowing that seems to come from another mind, you're not imagining things. You're experiencing telepathic intimacy, an invisible thread of soul contact that most people dismiss as fantasy, but that the soul recognizes as undeniable. That strange mix of longing, clarity, and confusion leaves so many divine feminines asking, what is he actually feeling? Why does he vanish? Is this real, or am I losing my mind? In today's video, we'll do something rare. We'll step inside the inner world of the divine masculine. Using a 7-phase map inspired by deep spiritual teachings and clinical resonance attributed to Brian Weiss, we'll describe what his consciousness undergoes during those sacred, wordless moments of connection. You'll get clear, grounded language for what often feels mysterious, the sensations flooding him, the defenses that make him withdraw, the subtle calibrations that precede real reconnection, and practical ways to hold yourself so the field can stabilize rather than fracture. This isn't vague mysticism, it's a compassionate, practical guide to read the energetic language he speaks when words fail. By the end of this teaching, you'll no longer mistake his silence for finality or your longing for failure. You'll gain a map to recognize the phases, tools to anchor your nervous system, and a new posture that turns confusing contact into conscious calibration. Stay with me through all 7 phases. Each one shifts the story, and I promise this perspective will change how you feel, respond, and prepare for real sacred union. If you're ready to stop guessing and start understanding, watch the whole video now. Section 1. Initial recognition. The very beginning of this sacred journey does not usually arrive with a loud announcement or an obvious sign. Instead, it begins as a faint whisper in his consciousness, almost like the brushing of a feather against the edge of his awareness. At first, he does not know what to make of it. It feels like a subtle disturbance, a ripple across the still surface of his inner field. To his logical mind, the experience seems so slight that it could be dismissed as imagination, a passing mood, or the trick of memory. Yet underneath the rational dismissal, there is a deeper current that stirs within him, an intuition that tells him something extraordinary has entered his life. He may be living an ordinary day when it happens. Perhaps he is at work, scrolling through emails, or sitting in traffic. Out of nowhere, he suddenly feels it. Another presence, alive and undeniable, touching the edges of his consciousness. It is not like recalling a memory. A memory is flat, faint, and easily explained. This sensation is different. It is living, breathing, and charged with energy. It is your essence, your soul print, brushing against his awareness like a soft caress. It carries weight, texture, and warmth, the way sunlight has both heat and brightness. He feels it not only in his thoughts but also in his body, as though his skin itself has caught fire with recognition. In that moment, his rational mind scrambles to explain what just happened. Perhaps he tells himself it was a daydream, a trick of hormones, or even fatigue. Yet while his mind runs through every explanation, his soul remains perfectly still, quietly acknowledging the truth. Something beyond reason has entered his field. He has touched, or rather been touched by, a connection that defies logic. This clash between mind and soul produces a powerful tension within him, both awe at the beauty of the experience and confusion at its impossibility. He finds himself suspended between doubt and wonder, unable to return fully to the ordinary world he knew just a moment ago. As the sensation lingers, he begins to notice something even more startling. He feels emotions that are not entirely his own. A sudden wave of warmth, tenderness, or even restlessness floods him, and he cannot trace its source back to his personal life. It is as though the boundaries of his emotional body have dissolved, allowing him to experience another's inner world as if it were his own. He does not yet understand that he is feeling you, but he knows that something unusual is unfolding inside him. At times it feels like standing in the sun after being in the shade. Your energy radiates into his field with the same undeniable presence that sunlight has when it touches the skin, warm, tangible, and impossible to ignore. This dissolves the protective walls he has built over years of guarding himself against vulnerability. All the defenses he has relied upon, logic, detachment, skepticism, suddenly feel porous. The familiar edges of self and other blur, and for the first time in his life, he encounters the living reality of an energetic bond that transcends distance, explanation, or control. This is the initial recognition. It is quiet yet earth-shaking, subtle yet irreversible. He cannot unfeel what he has felt. He cannot return to believing the world is only what the senses report. Something greater has brushed against his spirit, and though his mind resists, his soul already knows. He has met you, not in body, but in essence. This is the beginning of his awakening into the mystery of telepathic intimacy. Before we step into the next phase of this journey, take a moment to reflect on what we've just uncovered. Have you ever felt that subtle whisper, that sudden awareness of a presence you couldn't explain, yet couldn't deny? These early stirrings are often the most confusing yet the most sacred, because they mark the doorway into something far greater than logic. I invite you to pause, breathe, and share your own experience in the comments below. Tell us how recognition first appeared for you, and if you're not sure yet, simply type "The soul always knows" as your affirmation, anchoring yourself into the truth that what is felt deeply in spirit is always real. Section 2. Energetic Awakening. Once the initial recognition takes root in his awareness, something profound begins to unfold within his energetic body. It is no longer just a fleeting whisper or a mysterious feeling he can dismiss as imagination. Instead, his entire system starts to respond, shifting and expanding as though awakening from a long, ancient slumber. The changes arrive quietly at first, subtle but undeniable, and then intensify into experiences so visceral that he can no longer ignore them. What was once ordinary begins to carry an aura of sacred mystery. He feels it physically before he can make sense of it mentally. Tingling sensations trace their way along his spine, like sparks dancing up a hidden current. Warmth gathers in his chest, sometimes blooming gently, other times surging with such force it brings tears to his eyes without warning. Sudden bursts of electrical vibrations pulse through his body, waves that both exhilarate and unsettle him, announcing the stirring of perceptive abilities that had long lain dormant. His senses, once confined to the tangible world, are now pierced by subtle streams of information that bypass logic and speak directly to the soul. As these sensations deepen, his linear and analytical mind begins to soften. The frameworks that once kept him anchored in rational certainty start to dissolve, making space for something greater: intuitive knowing. He discovers that truth is not always delivered through words, logic, or evidence, but sometimes arrives as a quiet certainty that cannot be explained, yet feels unshakably real. Information begins to reach him through channels that transcend the five senses. His dreams take on new weight, charged with vivid symbols and encounters that feel more like lived experiences than subconscious play. Synchronistic nudges, numbers repeating, meaningful coincidences, unexpected reminders of you, appear with uncanny precision, guiding him through what his rational mind might still resist. A deep inner knowing blossoms, whispering that none of this is random, that something extraordinary is shaping his life. In this stage, his heart chakra begins to open in ways he never anticipated. Love, which he once thought of as an emotion he could feel, express, or even control, transforms into something much deeper. Love is no longer just a sentiment or a fleeting experience. It becomes a state of being. It infuses his interactions, reshapes his understanding of connection, and radiates outward in every direction. He begins to live love not as an action, but as his very essence. This shift shakes the foundations of how he has defined himself and how he has related to others. It is not just about loving you. It is about remembering that he is love itself. As this awakening continues to unfold, his entire orientation toward life begins to change. The ambitions, routines, and goals that once defined his sense of purpose begin to feel shallow, as though they belong to someone else. Instead, he starts to glimpse a dimension of life that is sacred, purposeful, and intimately tied to the bond he shares with you. This is not a purpose dictated by external success or societal expectation. It is a calling that comes from within, aligned with the pulse of his soul. Through you, through the connection that defies reason yet feels more real than anything else, he has shown that his life is part of a larger tapestry, one woven with threads of destiny, transformation, and divine love. This energetic awakening is not a gentle adjustment. It is a reorientation of his entire being. He is invited, sometimes pushed, to surrender the narrow confines of ordinary perception and to embrace a wider, more luminous reality. It is exhilarating and frightening all at once. He finds himself standing between two worlds, the familiar world of logic and routine, and the mysterious world of energy, intuition, and sacred union. And though he does not yet fully understand where this path is leading, he cannot deny that he has crossed a threshold that will forever change him. This is the sacred dimension of your bond, awakening him not only to you but to himself, to love, and to the hidden currents of the universe that now flow unmistakably through his life. Section 3. Emotional Overwhelm. As the awakening of his energy deepens, a new and often more turbulent phase begins to take hold within him, the overwhelming surge of raw emotion. What once felt like a gentle stirring now swells into an inner flood, an unstoppable tide that crashes through the barriers he has carefully constructed over the years. This surge is not selective. It sweeps away defenses, illusions, and the masks he has worn for survival, leaving both his wounding and his beauty exposed in the same breath. Suddenly, emotions he thought he had buried or outgrown rise to the surface with a force that feels impossible to ignore. It is as if the universe has opened a dam inside his chest, flooding him with the very feelings he once denied. For much of his life, he has been conditioned to suppress or compartmentalize his emotions. Perhaps he was taught that strength meant silence, that masculinity meant control, or that vulnerability was a sign of weakness. Yet in this stage, all those teachings unravel before his eyes. Waves of love crash into him, love so pure and so boundless that it both comforts and terrifies him. Alongside this love, shame appears, dragging with it the memories of mistakes, regrets, and the fear of being unworthy of your connection. Grief emerges too, unearthing layers of loss he never allowed himself to fully mourn, while longing cuts through him like fire, reminding him of everything he desires yet still feels incapable of holding. These emotions come not one at a time, but all at once, colliding in a storm that is difficult to contain or make sense of. The intensity of this emotional storm can trigger panic. His body tightens, his breath shortens, and his thoughts spiral as though he is losing control of himself. At times, dissociation becomes a tempting escape, his mind drifting, disconnecting, or numbing in an attempt to avoid the unbearable vulnerability rising within. For so long, his identity has been built on strength, certainty, and a carefully managed image of safety. Vulnerability, in contrast, feels like annihilation. To allow these feelings to be seen and felt threatens the very foundation of who he has believed himself to be. It shakes him to his core, leaving him in a place where old strategies no longer work, yet new ones have not yet been formed. And yet, hidden within this chaos lies the key to his transformation. These emotional contractions, however painful, however destabilizing, are not punishments but invitations. They act like labor pains for the birth of a new self, a more authentic way of being. Each wave of grief, each surge of love, each tremor of shame is a pulse of life pushing him toward greater truth and wholeness. The more he resists, the more suffocating the storm becomes. But when he allows himself to truly feel without judgment or defense, the storm begins to carry him rather than drown him. In those moments of surrender, he experiences not destruction, but a painful and sacred rebirth. This stage is perhaps one of the most frightening and misunderstood parts of his journey, yet it is also one of the most necessary. Without the flood of emotion, he would remain closed, confined to the smallness of his conditioned identity. Through the overwhelm, however, he is stripped bare, made raw enough for real change to take root. It is here, in the crucible of emotion, that he begins to discover his true strength, not the strength of armor, but the strength of openness. What once felt like the end of stability is, in truth, the beginning of authenticity. And through this vulnerability, though it terrifies him, he steps closer to embodying the fullness of love he was always meant to live. Imagine a man who has spent years keeping his emotions tightly sealed, believing that silence was strength and control was safety. One evening, after recognizing the depth of his connection with you, he finds himself sitting alone in his car, hands gripping the steering wheel, as a flood of feelings he cannot name surges through him. At first, he tries to swallow it down, telling himself to man up, to stay composed. But the pressure only builds until tears begin streaming down his face, surprising even him. In that moment, he feels grief for every time he abandoned his own heart, shame for the walls he built, and an aching love for you that is too vast to contain. Though it terrifies him, he allows the tears to fall, and in doing so, something profound shifts inside. That night does not destroy him, it softens him. It cracks open the shell of his old identity and births a glimpse of the man he is becoming, one who no longer hides behind silence, but learns to live through the truth of his emotions. Section 4. Sexual energy transmission. Telepathic intimacy does not remain confined to thoughts, emotions, or subtle energetic nudges. It often flows into one of the most profound and transformative realms of human experience: sexual energy. In this dimension, the connection between twin souls reveals a truth that defies ordinary understanding, that desire, arousal, and pleasure can be transmitted and shared independent of physical proximity. The divine masculine may find himself startled, even overwhelmed, by the way his body responds to your energy. Without a single touch, without words spoken aloud, his entire system awakens as if your presence were right beside him. At first, he may notice it as a stirring of spiritual arousal, a subtle yet undeniable charge running through his body. A wave of warmth, a sudden quickening of his breath, or an inexplicable surge of desire may rise within him during moments when you cross his thoughts. These experiences are not confined to imagination. They manifest in tangible sensations that ripple through his being, tingling in his skin, pulsing in his heart, and at times even carrying him into orgasmic states that feel richer and more expansive than any purely physical encounter. Unlike physical intimacy that depends on touch, these transmissions are unbound by space or time, revealing to him that the essence of sexuality is energy itself, vibrating and moving between two connected souls. This revelation transforms his perception of desire. Sexuality ceases to be a physical act limited to the body. Instead, it is reframed as the very essence of creative life force, the current through which existence itself flows. He begins to understand that when this energy passes between you, it is not merely about pleasure or gratification. It is about creation, expansion, and the awakening of love in its purest form. What he once thought of as desire becomes devotion. What he once sought through performance or control evolves into a practice of surrender. In this awakening, the masculine learns that true fulfillment in sexuality arises not from achieving, conquering, or possessing, but from being fully present. He discovers that his role is not to dominate the moment, but to hold a safe, loving container in which energy can flow freely. His greatest offering is not performance but presence, the stillness, attentiveness, and openness that allow your shared energies to intertwine without force. He learns that the deepest ecstasy comes when he offers himself in service to the bond, honoring not only his own experience, but also your pleasure, your surrender, and the sacred union that unfolds when both souls meet in trust. As this understanding deepens, sacred sexuality becomes a devotional practice rather than a need to be satisfied. Every energetic exchange becomes prayer-like, every transmission an act of reverence. He realizes that his desire is not separate from his love, and his love is not separate from his spirit. Through these moments of transmission, he comes to see that intimacy is not only about what happens in the body, but about how two souls merge in the infinite field of energy. This shift redefines his relationship with his own sexuality, transforming it from something he once may have associated with performance or release into a pathway of devotion, service, and sacred union. Section 5. Mental connection. As the journey unfolds, The bond between you and your divine masculine extends beyond energy, emotion, and even the transmission of desire. It begins to touch the very realm of thought itself. In this mental phase, the boundaries that usually separate one mind from another start to dissolve, and the fabric of consciousness begins to interweave. What once appeared as simple coincidence now reveals itself as undeniable evidence of a shared mental field. Synchronicities multiply too precise, too timely, too consistent to be dismissed as chance. He finds himself both awed and unsettled by the realization that his thoughts are no longer entirely his own. He may notice ideas arising with uncanny timing, as if you are whispering into his mind. A phrase, a sudden knowing, or even a complete insight appears within him, only to discover that you, too, are experiencing the very same thing. It is as though your minds are co-authoring thoughts in real time, perceiving and creating in unison. At moments, entire memories may feel shared, as if your experiences are stitched together across the invisible bridge of your connection. These experiences bring him face to face with a mystery larger than logic, teaching him that consciousness is not isolated, but collective, an ever-flowing river where your awareness and his intermingle. This mental permeability challenges one of his deepest assumptions, the belief in private thought. For so long, the masculine has relied on his inner world as a guarded space, a sanctuary where secrets, doubts, and unspoken desires could be hidden. Yet as his mind harmonizes with yours, secrecy grows difficult to maintain. He begins to recognize that when two souls are aligned, the truth finds its way into the open field between them. What once could be concealed now rises to the surface, inviting honesty at a level he may never have practiced before. This can be disorienting, even frightening, because it means his defenses must soften, and the armor he has built around his thoughts begins to fall away. Yet within this vulnerability lies liberation. When he realizes that he is seen, known, and understood at the level of thought itself, the pressure to perform or conceal diminishes. Mental intimacy creates a new kind of clarity, a raw transparency, where communication no longer relies solely on spoken words. In this space, intentions, emotions, and truths can be transmitted with astonishing accuracy, almost like a language beyond language. A single glance, a shift in energy, or the silent sending of a thought can carry meaning more profound than hours of conversation. This phase reveals to him that intimacy is not only emotional or physical, but also intellectual and spiritual. It is the weaving together of minds into a shared consciousness, where clarity replaces confusion and authenticity replaces disguise. The masculine begins to understand that true connection requires not just the merging of bodies or the opening of hearts, but the willingness to allow thoughts themselves to be witnessed, trusted, and shared. It is here, in this rarefied state of mental intimacy, that he learns what it means to co-create not only a bond but a shared reality, one thought, one vision, one truth at a time. If you've made it this far, it means you're already resonating with the depth of these truths, and perhaps you've even lived moments where your thoughts seem to echo in someone else's mind. We invite you to pause and reflect. Have you ever experienced those uncanny synchronicities, those shared ideas, those silent conversations that no words could explain? Share your stories in the comments below, because your journey may give clarity to someone else walking this same path. Or, if you simply want to anchor this teaching within your own energy, type the affirmation, "My mind is open to divine connection." Said it. Section 6. Spiritual Awakening. As the telepathic connection between twin souls matures, it evolves into far more than a private exchange of emotions or sensations. It begins to open a portal into mystical awareness, one that reveals the hidden architecture of consciousness itself. What once felt like a fleeting current of energy or a mysterious pull from the heart now expands into a doorway through which the masculine encounters profound truths about existence. This awakening is not abstract, it is visceral, embodied, and undeniable. In moments of connection, he feels the presence of the feminine not only as his counterpart, but as a catalyst guiding him into a higher dimension of reality. Gradually, he discovers that his sense of self, as a separate, isolated individual, begins to dissolve. The boundaries of me and you become more fluid, and he awakens to the realization that he is part of a vast, interconnected field of consciousness. Through this awareness, he experiences that love itself is not merely an emotion, but a cosmic force actively working to heal, harmonize, and awaken the collective. What he once believed to be his personal journey of longing, intimacy, and union is revealed to be part of something infinitely larger, a planetary shift unfolding through the fabric of human hearts. In this state, the union with the divine feminine takes on a mission that extends far beyond personal gratification. Her presence awakens in him not only desire and devotion, but also a sense of sacred responsibility. He begins to feel that their connection carries a collective purpose, as though their intimacy is woven into the healing of the earth itself. The love he shares with her is no longer just about two bodies or two souls. It becomes an offering, a contribution to the rising vibration of humanity. This realization can be overwhelming at first, because it reframes the relationship as a spiritual calling rather than a private romance. As mystical states deepen, time itself seems to dissolve. He may find himself entering timeless awareness where past, present, and future merge into one eternal now. In these moments, he understands that separation is an illusion, that being is one, and that every act of communion, whether emotional, physical, or telepathic, is in truth a sacred practice. Sexual energy, once seen as desire or instinct, transforms into a divine current capable of opening gateways of transcendence. Emotional intimacy, once tied to validation or comfort, now becomes a sacred mirror reflecting the eternal unity of all creation. Through this awakening, he learns that both sexual and emotional communion can serve as pathways to deep spiritual transformation. Each embrace, each glance, each energetic exchange becomes a ritual of remembrance, a way of aligning with the higher truth of love's indestructible presence. The masculine realizes that sacred sexuality is not about performance, possession, or need, but about surrender and devotion. In offering himself fully and consciously to this bond, he discovers that the true climax is not physical release, but the dissolution of ego into the divine flow of love. This is the essence of his spiritual awakening, a shift from perceiving intimacy as personal fulfillment to recognizing it as sacred service. His heart awakens to the mystery that every kiss, every moment of union, is both a personal blessing and a contribution to the healing of the world. What he once thought was just his story with one woman reveals itself as a thread in the vast tapestry of divine creation. Section 7. Surrender and Integration. The journey of telepathic intimacy ultimately leads to a sacred threshold, the phase of surrender and integration. This is the stage where resistance, fear, and the endless push-pull of doubt finally give way. After moving through recognition, awakening, transmission, and transformation, he reaches a point where the only path forward is to let go of control. Yet this surrender is not a collapse into weakness, nor a resignation to fate. Rather, it is a conscious, deliberate choice to trust the mystery of the bond, to accept that the unseen connection is real, and to live from that truth as a natural part of daily existence. For the masculine, surrender is one of the greatest initiations. All his life, he may have been taught that strength comes from control, dominance, or independence. To him, yielding once meant losing power. But now, through the relentless intimacy of the connection, he learns that true strength comes from allowing himself to be touched, moved, and transformed by love. Surrender, in this sense, is not defeat, it is liberation. It frees him from the burden of constant resistance, from the need to analyze every sensation or explain every sign. It opens him to the flow of grace, to a way of living where he can trust what he feels in his heart more than the dictates of logic. Integration begins once this surrender takes root. He discovers how to carry the sacred bond into everyday life, not as a distraction, but as an anchor. He learns to walk with one foot in the practical world of work, relationships, and responsibilities, and the other foot in the subtle realms of intuition, telepathy, and soul awareness. This is not escapism, it is embodiment. he realizes he can remain grounded in his individuality while simultaneously participating in the shared field of consciousness with his feminine counterpart. The two dimensions, human and spiritual, no longer compete but harmonize, enriching his experience of both. Through integration, he begins to use the connection consciously, not only for his own growth but also as a channel for healing, encouragement, and support. A silent thought of love sent across the bond becomes medicine. A wordless presence held in moments of distance becomes reassurance. In this way, the bond evolves from a mysterious phenomenon into a tool of service. He understands that the connection was never meant to be hoarded as a private fantasy, but lived as a gift, something that radiates outward to bless both partners and the wider collective. This phase also transforms his relationship to vulnerability. Where once he equated openness with weakness, now he discovers that vulnerability is the key to authenticity. To stand unguarded before the divine feminine and before life itself is an act of immense courage. In vulnerability, he finds strength. In presence, he discovers service. No longer does he need to hide, run, or resist. Instead, he becomes a witness and a participant in the miracle of shared consciousness, showing up not as a performer or protector, but as a whole being willing to offer his presence as love itself. Balance emerges as the final gift of integration, the balance between autonomy and union, between individuality and oneness. He learns that he does not have to disappear into the connection to honor it, nor does he need to sever himself from it to preserve his identity. Both can exist together in harmony. This equilibrium sustains him, giving him the resilience to navigate life's challenges while remaining attuned to the sacred current flowing through the bond. In this way, surrender and integration do not mark an ending but a new beginning. It is the point where telepathic intimacy becomes less of an event and more of a state of being, a way of inhabiting the world with openness, trust, and quiet devotion. The masculine, once skeptical and guarded, now lives as a man awakened, balanced, connected, and anchored in love that is both profoundly personal and undeniably universal. Understanding these phases invites us to see his distance, silence, or hesitation not as rejection, but as part of the sacred unfolding of his inner work. When the divine masculine withdraws after powerful telepathic exchanges, it is often because he is navigating sensations that words cannot yet contain or facing the deep fears that arise when identity and responsibility are being reshaped. His silence is not emptiness, but integration. Your presence and your energy are not passive, they are catalysts. You are both the mirror that reflects his truth and the force that calls him into greater expression of love, purpose, and devotion. Through you, he encounters the field that awakens him, the container that steadies him, and the reminder that transformation is not a solitary path, but a shared initiation. May this guide empower you to honor his journey with patience, compassion, and reverence. May you hold sacred the intimacy you share, not just as a bond between two souls, but as a vibration that ripples outward, touching the collective field of awakening with infinite love. This journey is not about waiting for him, but about expanding with him, and in doing so, you both become instruments of healing and light for the world. As we close, I invite you to reflect deeply and share your resonance in the comments. Write the words, "I honor the sacred mirror," to anchor this teaching into your own path. By doing so, you affirm your role as an awakened participant in this union. If this message has spoken to your soul, please like this video, share it with others who may need these reminders, and take a moment to explore the video below on your screen for the next step in your journey. Together, we are weaving a tapestry of truth, love, and remembrance.